Hi everyone, today we're going to talk about conflict. Conflict is something that's going to happen to all of us while we're at work, and there are effective and ineffective ways to handle it. This is something that your book doesn't cover in the depth that I would like for it to, so this lecture is particularly important to me. I hope that as you listen to this, you'll take a moment and try to figure out where you fall. What is your conflict style? What is your orientation? What is your natural response to conflict? The better you know yourself, the better you'll be able to predict your own natural tendencies. We all have these natural tendencies during conflict, but our natural tendencies are not always what is best for the individual situation. The better we know ourselves, the better we can cater our behaviors and our attitudes towards the situation so that everyone comes out winning and the fewest amount of hurt feelings occur. Now, in general, conflict exists when people who depend on each other have different views, interests, or goals, or have different perspectives. You're never going to actually engage in conflict with someone who you don't depend on. If you're not interrelated with someone, it doesn't matter what your different views are, what your different perspectives are. So, first, if you find yourself in conflict with someone, take a moment to step back and recognize what your relationship is with them, because you wouldn't care if you didn't already care about them in some way. That's important to recognize. Conflict occurs for primarily three reasons. The first is when you express disagreement about something. You simply have different opinions. A project should be completed in different ways. A different religious belief. A different moral belief. These are all things that can lead to conflict. Also, conflict occurs in the case of interdependence. Sometimes we need space. Sometimes we need less space. The subject of interdependence, especially in interpersonal relationships, romantic relationships in general, is very, very prevalent. Okay, that amount of space, the closeness versus autonomy that you need, that's a large source of conflict. And also, conflict occurs when at least one and hopefully both people feel that something needs to be resolved. Conflict is stereotyped as being a bad thing. Okay, it's something that is going to hurt feelings and be detrimental to a relationship, but that's not true. In fact, conflict is a natural part of all relationships. A relationship cannot change without conflict occurring. Now, conflict can be good or bad depending on how it's handled. Conflict happens in a number of ways. Principles of conflict, like I said, it's a natural process in all relationships. It may be either overt or covert. Overt communication is when it is out in the open, and both people engaged in the conflict know that the conflict is actually happening. Covert conflict is sneaky. It's when one person has a problem and expects the other person to pick up on cues that lets them know that they're in trouble, or that they themselves as the message receiver are in trouble, or that the sender is unhappy. Covert conflict is very ineffective because you're not both playing with the same deck of cards. Only one person knows what the problem really is. So make sure that you're ready to fully articulate and express your conflict. And if you cannot truly articulate it, maybe there's not really an issue. Maybe it's what you're feeling in the moment is a bleed from other things happening in your life. Things to be considered. Another principle of conflict. Conflict behaviors and meanings are shaped by social situations. We all have jobs to do in any context. Perhaps at home you need to take out the garbage the morning before pickup. And perhaps at work you're the person that submits things for deadlines. If you miss a deadline at home with your job or at work with your job, there are different consequences. There's different and also different ways of being approached. If you miss taking out the garbage on time, then the consequence is, you're going to have a pile of garbage for a week. And your significant other and whoever else in the house is probably going to be very annoyed, and they may very overtly express their displeasure with you. If you miss that deadline at work, there are much more serious repercussions, and the way it will be handled will be different because there is a different social protocol. So you need to be aware of these things. Like I said, conflict can be managed well or poorly. The better conflict is managed, the more constructive it will be for the relationship. In fact, conflict can be very, very good for relationships. Conflict is how you grow, and conflict is how you come to better understand one another. Only through conflict can you assure that both parties are getting their needs fully met. There are three orientations towards conflict. These orientations are natural. We all believe one of these three. three things, even if we don't realize it. The first orientation towards conflict is lose-lose. You have a lose-lose orientation towards conflict if you believe that no matter what happens, this will end badly. Conflict is a bad thing. In the end, even if something changes, both people will have their feelings hurt, and the hurt feelings will not be worth the change that could occur. Or, no matter what's going to happen, nobody's going to get what they actually want in the end. There's no solution in which both parties can be happy. Second, there is a win-lose conflict orientation. That is the belief that conflict is a competition. Regardless of what the outcome is, one party is going to be happy and one party is going to be sad at the end, because one party gets what they want and one doesn't. And then there's the win-win orientation. This is the belief that somehow, some way, everybody can come out on top, and it's worth any hurt feelings or strife that happens in between. Because, one, there's an alternative. There's something out there such that you're both going to get exactly what you want, or there's an alternative solution where you're both less unhappy. There's an in-between, so to speak. Now, in addition to your orientation, we all naturally have our own responses towards conflict. Okay, the first response is exit. Exit people are those that they see a conflict coming, they feel tension building, and they take off. Okay, they would rather just avoid the problem altogether than have it out. These are typically people who believe that nothing good can come out of the conflict, nothing good that is actually worth the price you're going to pay. Next, you have people with a neglect response. These are people that live in the middle of conflict and don't approach it. For instance, if you know someone who is in an abusive relationship or lives with someone who has a drug problem or alcohol addiction but doesn't say anything. They live in the conflict constantly, but they're neglecting to actually approach it. Third, you have a loyalty response. These are people who don't really take a side or a stance in a conflict because of their beliefs or opinions, but more so because of how they identify themselves. For instance, if you ever broke up with a significant other and you got some of the friends in the divorce, yeah, well, those people have a loyalty response. It's not so much who they believe was right or wrong as how they oriented themselves towards you. If you yourself have sided with a friend, whether you believe they were right or wrong, you have a loyalty response towards conflict. And it's not just a person. A lot of people in politics respond with a loyalty response. They may not agree with everything on the Republican or Democrat platform, but they're going to vote and pursue those principles because that is how they identify themselves, and therefore they feel it's the right thing to do. Finally, there's the voice response. These are people who have something to say and intend to be heard. Now, hopefully, they're also listeners so that they will allow you to be heard equally. Now, taking this response to conflict and our orientation towards conflict, we get conflict styles. There's a much better picture of this in your PowerPoint. All right. So, if you look at this chart, on the x-axis here, we have low to high cooperation. And on the y-axis, we have low to high assertiveness. Looking at the combination of someone's cooperation and assertiveness, which comes from their conflict orientation and conflict response, you get their conflict style. Pay close attention to this. You will need this to complete your weekly assignment. Alright, so the first type, we have avoidance. Okay? Avoidance are right here at the orientation. They have a low assertiveness and a low degree of cooperation. What's the significance of this? Well, they don't really speak up when they have conflict, and they don't want to cooperate either. They want to avoid it altogether. These are people who are either apathetic towards or afraid of conflict in general. So, what do you think they have in their orientations? Yeah. They have more of a lose-lose orientation, and their response is exit. They get out there as soon as possible. You see how that kind of works, how they filter in? Okay, let's look at the next one. If you follow the x-axis again, and you go from low assertiveness and low cooperation to high, so still low assertiveness but high cooperation, we have the accommodators. These are the people that
Okay, you're upset. I can see this. Something's got to change because I want this to be happy, but I'm afraid of feelings being hurt. I'm going to give you whatever you want to preserve what is important in this relationship. I'm ready for that, for anything else to change. So give in. They don't ask their own needs, which means that often they become unhappy because they've let themselves be run for, essentially. They do it for good of the relationship, for preserving what we believe is good. Other ratings. Okay, we have low cooperation and high assertiveness. These are the competitors. These people have a strong win-lose competition. They go in and they believe someone win, somebody's going to lose. There is no alternative. And because of that, they're vocal. They are very, very vocal. And they're not really to bend, to fight. Okay? Not very effective. On the other hand, we have high assertiveness and high cooperation. Okay, these people are collaborators. They believe that there's something in the world such that you can win and I can win. If I give a little and you give a little, then what's important to both of us can be met. Then you have the people who are in the middle. These who are compromisers, the third option. Your idea is perhaps there's a now Barton